very good question and very important question. The Chinese economy, of course, for the last several years has been the #2 economy in the world in terms of international currency-based GDP. Some people claim that the Chinese economy is #1 if you measure in purchasing power parity measures. So this is a large country, and it's very significant. Its economic future is very significant for the whole world. First, I'll say there are a number of areas or sectors that are doing quite well in China today. So if you look at what Chinese authorities now call new productive forces of the economy, so this kind of advanced tech sectors, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, integrated circuits, electric vehicles, batteries, renewable energy equipment and supplies, and then everything along their supply chains. Those sectors are doing quite well. They've been booming. The industries, the manufacturing, the sales, both domestically and externally, have grown tremendously in the last 5 years. Next, on the list of what's doing well, I'd say infrastructure has grown tremendously. A lot of particularly Western critics or Western analysts have criticized China for having ghost cities, which is not completely unfair. It's partly true. But there's been a huge increase in infrastructure investment all across China, which, leaving aside some of the market rationales for it, they really do genuinely improve people's quality of life. They make it easier to commute, they make it easier to live even in lower tier cities and third tier cities, in rural areas. They create beauty, they create public entertainment. So that's been a good change, and that's been a significant change in the last couple years. Then getting to what's doing badly. If you look at retail, wholesale, anything oriented to the consumer economy, both goods and services, some enterprises have been doing well, but by and large, most have faced very weak revenues, very weak consumer markets. And there are a few places where it's doing a little better, but overall that's pretty consistent all across the country, as far as I can tell. Certain types of manufacturing sectors have faced difficulty. So if you think of manufacturing that's oriented to the domestic consumer market in China, maybe that's furniture manufacturers, some kind of clothing manufacturers, some kind of luxury good producers, like luxury jewelry, that has not been doing super well. And manufacturers oriented toward what we might call more sensitive kinds of technology that might be subject to de-risking campaigns or multinational firms, industrial diversification strategies. Those sectors have not been doing very well within China as industries have relocated. When I talk about the Chinese economy, and I'm sorry I'm going on for a while on this, but it's an important category. When I talk about the struggles that the Chinese economy has been facing in recent years and since COVID, I typically focus on 4 areas or 4 causal mechanisms or 4 trends. And I'll go through them in order of least important to most important. So least important, I would say, would be geopolitics, actually. And you might think this is counterintuitive because this is what we see in the news a lot. This is easy to talk about, and we in a political science faculty, of course, like talking about the geopolitics. And what I mean by geopolitics is kind of, as I mentioned, the risk diversification strategies of different multinational businesses as well as Chinese businesses moving industries overseas. We can see hard evidence for this in a couple areas. So I've been looking at smartphone production around Henan province. A lot of us use Apple devices, Apple products, whether it's computers or iPhones. A lot of the iPhones Apple produces used to be made in Henan, in an industrial zone just outside the provincial capital of Zhengzhou. Since 2022, exports of smartphones from this region of Henan province have been in pretty stark decline. So not since 2018, but really since midway through COVID. We can see it looks like production is down somewhere between 30 to 50%. That's significant. But why do I rank this as number 4, bottom? Overall, for the economy, we don't see much of an impact for most industries. And Chinese exports overall are up. They're still strong. Number 3, the third most important, would be business confidence. So that's also talked about a lot as far as concerns, especially within China, about the economy's performance. But business confidence in China's case is really worst for the large enterprises, large private enterprises, the ones most subject to government policy, nationwide policy, like you have the Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, some of the education firms like New Oriental. They have difficult business confidence, but they also represent a very small share of the economy, as is true in any large country. SMEs, small and medium enterprises, are the backbone of pretty much any large country's economy. So this is not the biggest reason in my view. Second most important is the real estate sector. We can talk a lot more about the real estate sector if you want. Real estate prices in lots and lots of cities across the country outside of Beijing and Shanghai have been in steep decline since 2019. We're talking about declines potentially between 10 and 25% so far, depending on the city, depending on the neighborhood. We're also seeing rental prices decline significantly, and if rental markets do worse, it's harder to justify higher asset prices because you can't make a return, you can't make a yield from the housing that you own. And this is really China's worst long-term problem. Like over the next 10 years, this will be very difficult for the Chinese economy because so many people own property, and if everyone sees their wealth disappearing because their property is becoming worth less and less, then people won't want to spend as much as they once wanted to spend. If you think today you have 10 million baht, and tomorrow you wake up and you discover, oh gee, I only have 1 million baht, or maybe I only have a couple tens of thousands baht, your spending patterns will be very different. Even if your income stays completely the same. Just psychologically, you will spend very, very differently. You will behave and plan very, very differently. If one day you think you have 10 million baht, and the next day you wake up and you only have 100,000 baht. And that's called the negative wealth effect. But this is long term. The number one reason, which is really very much grounded and makes perfect sense for common sense, is lingering effects of COVID. The Chinese economy faced a lot of shutdowns from COVID in 2020, tiny bit in 2021, more so in 2022, some dislocation related to COVID at the beginning of 2023 as the society was reopening. But if you think of what does a lockdown mean in China's case, it meant people have to stay indoors, they can't work, they can't go out and spend as they normally would. And if people can't work, they're not making an income. If people can't spend, then small businesses, small retail establishments, small services are not making revenues, so they can't pay their workers. And the whole economy grounds to a halt. Well, in the US case, and also in the case in Thailand under Prayut, when there were COVID dislocations, which were not as bad, not as substantial of a lockdown as what China experienced, but when there were COVID dislocations, the government provided consumer-oriented stimulus. The government gave cash handouts. They gave you an app and they said, we'll send baht to you on the app. Same in the US. The US arguably overdid it, but they absolutely gave out lots and lots of money to consumers. In China, that largely did not happen. A few cities experimented with very small consumption voucher programs. Tianjin had this program, I think Shenzhen had this program. But by and large, not on the scale of the US, of Japan, of Thailand, of a lot of more developed economies. When you have people who can't work, they can't spend, they get no support from the government, what do? They spend down their savings. And now China's woken up in 2023, 2024. People can go out and spend. People can go out and behave as they once did. But if you've been losing money for the last 5 years, if you've been seeing your savings steadily depleted over the last 5 years, and if a lot of businesses have closed during the COVID period because they couldn't support their employees, they didn't have revenues, and therefore employment is a lot worse for a lot of these businesses, then it's hard to revive the economy. It's hard to revive consumer spending. You can't fundamentally have consumer spending if consumers don't have money. So that's the number one issue, I would say, that's facing China right now. Shorter term, but number one.